Hi everyone, Howard from startupremarkable.com here, and these are the interviews where we meet successful entrepreneurs and we learn from them what they've done to be successful so you can go and do the same thing as well. And today I'm here with a very special guest, Fraser Doherty from Superjam, and the topic of this interview is how to make your first million by the age of 20. That's something Fraser has done, and it's a pretty amazing story. So it's great to have you here, Fraser.
Thanks for having me.
On a warm London day. You don't get too many of them.
It's a great day.
It is. And Fraser, so it's a cool, absolutely cool story. Could you maybe give us a little bit of a background how you created Superjam?
Sure. The whole adventure began when I was 14 years old, and my gran taught me how to make jam one afternoon in her kitchen up in Glasgow, and kind of started making it myself as a hobby and selling it to neighbours and at farmers markets and to little shops. And a couple of years later, I'd left school, and it got to the point I was making about 1,000 jars of jam a week and selling them at farmers markets all over Scotland. I then came up with this idea to make jam 100% from fruit. So without any sugar or anything artificial, and got the opportunity to pitch that to Waitrose. They have these events called Meet the Buyer Days, which are kind of like the X Factor of selling groceries to supermarkets, and hundreds of people show up and just get to pitch their products, and so that's where I kind of got my big break.
Nice, and I actually see one here, so I'm just going to show everybody. Here is a pot of Superjam, and it's everywhere here in the UK at the moment. It's doing really well. Fraser, so what do you think was, looking back, what was one of the kind of like the big kind of, I suppose, breaks you got, or like one of those kind of moments that you look back and go, wow, maybe that was luck, or maybe that was like, just being in the right place, or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the chance to just get to pitch my product to Waitrose when I was about 16, and I went along wearing my dad's suit. It was probably 2 sizes too big for me, Nice. I'd never done anything like that before, and just told them this idea I had, and it was amazing they were willing to listen to an idea from anyone, even a 16-year-old kid. But they explained that I didn't really have a product, I just had an idea. I didn't have packaging, I didn't have a factory.
But you were making the jams at this point? Yeah.
On a really small scale. Yeah. Not a big enough scale to sell to a supermarket. So they then said if I could get it into a factory and get labels designed, they'd maybe give it a shot. And so I then spent about a year getting labels designed which were around the theme of a comic book. Something like Superjam, Superman. And I was Jam Boy, this kind of superhero character. And we even spoke about making a superhero costume for me to wear at the launch of the whole thing. Nice. But then I pitched that to Waitrose, and they just said no. They said
really?
But it was ridiculous. It didn't really kind of get the message across of why anybody should buy my product. So then completely started again and came up with the labels that we have now. And I guess I learned that you have to be really clear about why somebody should buy your product. And that seems obvious, but when somebody's in the supermarket, they're going to spend less than a second even looking at your product. And if you're lucky, they will read why they should buy it. And too many people say, here are the 10 reasons you should buy my product. If you can just focus all your energy on telling them one reason, then maybe they'll listen to that.
So when you went back, you did some more kind of rebranding, I suppose you'd call it, and going back, do you find that, how much do you think the success of Superjam is down to the way you branded it then, or the product?
I think all the factors have to be right. If no matter how good the jam in the jar tasted, if the label didn't look great, nobody would take it off the shelves, and it could have been sat there on the shelf, and without any media coverage, nobody would have heard about it, and they would have never taken it off the shelf. But if it tasted like crap, then they wouldn't come back. People wouldn't still be buying it 5 years later. So you have to, get everything right. And sometimes people say, well, that was easy because you had this story that you were this kid, and your grand taught you how to make jam. And I always say that was my story, and that really helped. And it helped that I was able to tell that story. But I say that everybody has a story. If my dad had been made redundant and he started making jam and selling it, then he would have had a great story. If my gran had started selling jam, she would have had an even better story. So I think you just have to figure out what your story is.
Okay, nice. I like it. And it sounds like, as well as, you know, getting to meet Waitrose and coming up with some cool branding, even maybe not at the first point, it sounds like you just didn't give up as well. You just kept on, kind of, you persevered with it, and a lot of people might have kind of, you know, once they said no the first time, maybe given up, or the second time, but you kept at it. One of the things I always wonder is people who are being told no. When should people take maybe when should people hold and keep going, and when should people go okay, I'm getting the feedback here, it's always no.
I think the thing about it was that, you know, after I had spent years of my life and all the money I had, I put all of my love into this product, and Waitrose said no. You know, it was all wrong. And that was the lowest point of the whole journey. It was a moment where I thought about giving up. You know, family and friends said this is where we would give up if we were in the shoes. And I guess the only you know, in a moment like that, you have to really ask yourself, why are you doing this at all? You know, why do you believe in it? And I guess the reason was that I believed that this was a product that people wanted to buy. And you know, family and friends tell you things sometimes to protect you. And sometimes, you know, that's a good thing, and they do give you the right answer. But the person that you most need to listen to is the customer, and Waitrose still said it was a good idea. So that gave me enough hope to try again. Nice.
And other than Waitrose, what is there anybody being kind of key that has kind of helped you along, maybe a mentor or people kind of close to you, and how did you kind of how did that come about, and how could somebody else who's kind of looking for that kind of advice?
I mean, I've been amazed at how willing people are to share what they've learned and give people advice. And you know, when I was a kid, maybe 15 or 16, I met this local entrepreneur, a guy called Kevin, and he'd set up a successful business supplying supermarkets, and he was just willing to meet me for a coffee and tell me a bit about how supermarkets worked.
And did you contact him, or did he contact you?
I think it was like a neighbour said, "Oh, I know this guy who's an entrepreneur."
Cool.
You know, my parents hadn't set up a business, and I think they were not sure what advice to give me and that type of thing. So he gave me great advice, and you know, I still meet up with him now 5-6 years later.
Brilliant.
So he, you know, I couldn't have done it without the advice I got from him. But I've also never been afraid to just write to companies that I'm inspired by, and you know, ask for their advice, and you know, people are pretty willing to.
Can you give an example of? Sometimes you might do that.
I mean, when I was having a hard time with the packaging, I wrote to the guys at Innocent. You know, they're a big brand of smoothies, and you know, they've done an amazing job of branding, and they were willing to just spend about 10-15 minutes with me, just telling me some of the things they've learned about packaging. And you know, the message that they gave me was this whole idea that a brand should just have one really clear message that it's trying to get across. And I think that advice really helped me to get the packaging right.
Cool. And for somebody out there then who maybe is struggling with something and could do with a little bit of advice from somebody who's, you know, successful, how would you recommend people actually like reach out to people? What did you find was most effective when you're you know, going cold and people may not know you?
I think I know from, you know, for me, there are maybe kids email me and they say I'm selling cakes to the neighbours and I want to make a little business out of it. What advice do you have? And you know, it's easy enough to just give general advice, but I think it's most effective if they email and say I'm having a really hard time with finding customers or with packaging, or you know. So I think before asking somebody for advice, you have to really know what it is you're trying to ask and what it is that you're having a hard time with, and you know, and I think if you can put it to them like that, then they'll usually just give you a straightforward answer. But I think you also have to really respect people's time, and you know, you have to respect that people aren't giving advice. People are just giving advice out of the goodness of their heart. They don't have any obligation to do that, and you have to make it interesting for them. And you know, I think most people who've had success were helped by people along the way, and are more than happy to help others trying to do the same thing.
Nice. And okay, biggest challenge that you had to overcome?
Sure. I mean, there was all kinds of challenges, I guess. But finance is like a classic thing that people have a hard time with. So some people imagine that you have to borrow a whole lot of money, or you have to take on investment.
Do you ever get investment?
No, I've never borrowed any money either. And you know, I always think you don't have to jump in at the deep end. You don't have to borrow money, and you know, you don't have to build a factory. You don't have to do any of that thing. You know, there are people who already have a factory, for example, and in my case, you know, we work with a company that makes the products for us. So, and then I was able to convince them to put up enough money to help get it off the ground by financing all of the ingredients and jars and that type of stuff.
So you convinced the factory people to put up that money.
Yeah.
How did you do that?
I mean, I guess the whole reason that anyone was behind the idea was that Waitrose had.
Oh really?
You know, were interested.
Sure.
That there was some degree of commitment that they
you had some kind of intent from them. Yeah. Okay. Great.
So then, you know, I think once you have that, it's easy to negotiate everything else, and it's possible to get your idea off the ground without you know, without a whole lot of money. If you can just figure out who it is that you need to convince and what it is that you need. Okay,
cool. You're down here in London. I know that you're having a great time in India recently. You're CEO of a very successful company, which you founded. How do you kind of prioritize and kind of get everything done? Because I'd imagine focus is something which is, you know, you got to be good at. So how do you make sure you do the right thing?
Yeah, focus is tricky. I mean, I think the whole thing got off the ground because I was probably obsessed, and I just worked on this every day for years and years. And then now the challenge is that you have so many ideas, and you know, there are so many different things we could do with this. And you know, people every day say, have you put it in little jars yet? And why don't you start selling peanut butter? And why don't you start selling in Sweden? And you know, when you think about it, you could do any number of things. So just trying to.
So how do you decide what to do?
It's tricky. I mean, I guess I just try the things that feel right. You know, it feels right to try and sell the products in America, for example. That seems like an obvious idea.
Okay.
And then I guess, you know, just making sure that I don't kind of lose. That I don't drop the ball in a sense, and that I keep focusing on the customers that we already have in the supermarkets here. I think it's easy to kind of move on to the next thing and you know, try and get more customers in other countries or something, when you know it's really important to make sure that the people who are already buying the product are happy. And
do you have some kind of way that you get constant feedback from them?
Yeah, I mean the supermarkets are pretty open about how well sales are performing. And, there's no pretense that if you're not selling well enough, then they'll just sell something else.
I'm sure, yeah. And on the kind of the customer level, do you kind of speak to them and know?
Yeah, I mean, probably something that's tricky between a physical product and maybe a web business, for example, is that you don't really have much direct contact with the people who are buying your products. So stuff like social media and the web and all of that helps, and you know, I think the more open you are to people sending in ideas, then the more you're going to get, and you know, I think that stuff is gold dust. You know, if people, you know, even a complaint is a valuable piece of information to you know, figure out how you can make the product better.
Cool. Okay, Fraser, I know we're kind of coming up to the end of the interview, and just one question I'd love to ask is, you know, you've seen a lot and you've done amazing things now. What if there was one piece of advice that you would give somebody who's just kind of starting out after everything you've learned? Kind of what would be the one kind of thing that you think is key?
It sounds cheesy probably, but I guess you know, just don't be afraid.
Okay.
You know, I think I meet so many people who have a great idea, or they say I would love to start a business, and they don't give it a shot. They don't take the first step and just try, and I think that's a real shame.
Why do you think that is?
I think people overestimate the risks. I think people imagine that if they give their idea a shot, people will laugh at them. That you know, if it doesn't work, it's going, you know, they're going to be bankrupted, and that, you know, that it's going to destroy their life. When really, it's possible to just try your idea out at the weekends. You know, you don't have to quit your job. You know, and if people say they love it, then do more of it. But if it doesn't fly, then you know, try something else.
Absolutely wise words. Well, Fraser, it's been awesome having you here on Startup Remarkable.
Thank you.
Here is the jam. It's delicious. I've had it many times. It is in the UK. If someone's in the US, because I know we have a lot of people from the US watching this.
We're launching the US later this year, so yeah, just keep your eyes peeled.
Great stuff. And you're on the web. What would be if someone wanted to log on to the website?
It's just superjam.co.uk.
Superjam.co.uk. And are you on Twitter? Yeah.
It's Fraser Doherty.
Fraser Doherty. I'll put a link at the bottom of this blog post. Great stuff, guys. Thanks, Fraser, and see you all soon.
See ya.